So hello guys, and welcome to another video. And over the past couple months, there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not the Paper Mario series is canon or not. And I see a lot of things that are brought up, a lot of videos that have been made about either the Paper Mario series or the Mario RPGs, a lot of discussion on Twitter, and I feel like this has especially been brewing around this time because of the Thousand Year Door remake, and just how interesting of a Mario adventure Thousand Year Door is. So it's definitely understandable why people would be arguing whether it would be canon or not, because there's a lot of people kind of going from different sides here, but I feel like with a lot of the things that we've seen over the years and the evidence that we have, I think it really makes the most sense to say that the Paper Mario series is canon, and we'll kind of get into that and kind of discuss that throughout the video, but joining me is Fawful the Great, who definitely has a lot of opinions on Paper Mario being canon.
Hello, hello, hello.
But yeah, so I feel like the first thing that's kind of worth bringing up is different elements from the series being used in other Mario games. And I feel like that's probably the most obvious thing that you could point to, since there's actually quite a lot of them throughout the 2000s, like Goomba King being in 64DS and Mario Kart DS, Star Spirits in Mario Party 5, Wackas and Snow Bunnies in Mario Party 6, Tweesters in Mario Party 5, 6, 7, DDR Mario Mix in debatably Mario Galaxy, the Dark Boos in Partners in Time, the White Magic Koopas in Bowser Jr.'s Journey, the Koopa Trolls being in Mario Pinball Land, and also referenced in Super Princess Peach, the Shield guys from Paper Mario Color Splash in Mario Tennis Aces, and Paper Mario 64's Bowser's Castle in Super Circuit. So there's quite a lot of references, either kind of referencing like different characters, enemies, and different things like that in a lot of the Mario games in the 2000s, and games that would undeniably be canon for a lot of people. So I feel like a lot of these, especially like Goomba King and Star Spirits, definitely kind of confirm that 64, at the very least, is canon. But we'll get into how Thousand Year Door and Super Paper Mario are canon in a little bit. But what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so Goomba King, it's funny because when I first played Mario 64 DS as a kid, I had not played Paper Mario, so I didn't know that he was original to that. But like, it's the same design. He's called Goombas, but it's clearly the same design. They just renamed him, and of course Mario Kart DS. There's also it's not just the white Magic Koopas, right? Is it also the red and the green ones also originated in Paper Mario?
Yeah, I think I'll have to check that on the Mario Wiki, but I know the white Magic Koopas for sure, because it was referenced on an infographic that I've seen for quite a while about like different variants of the Magic Koopa. But yeah, actually, yeah, there's red Magic Koopas, green Magic Koopas. I'm not sure if yellows were from Paper Mario originally or not, but I know like there's definitely a few, or actually, red Magic Koopas were in Super Mario RPG. So
yeah,
I know
that one was like an individual though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also like because I distinctly remember I was looking at Mario Wiki earlier, and I looked at the white Magic Koopa, and I saw the unused things, and I looked at a couple of the other ones, and it listed their first appearance as Paper Mario. Maybe it was the green one. I don't really remember, but yeah. And the Dark Boos in Partners in Time, I actually brought that up on Twitter recently because I was jokingly saying like, oh, Partners in Time does a better job of having Paper Mario elements than Paper Jam.
Yeah. And then also, like, I mentioned recently on Twitter about Koopa Trolls possibly having a 3D model somewhere out there, because they have, like, pre-rendered sprites in Mario Pinball Land.
Yeah, like, Mario Pinball Land is interesting because, like, it has all those pre-rendered sprites. I wonder if anything was made by those devs specifically just for that, or if there is a Koopa Troll model that Nintendo provided for that.
Yeah. And yeah, it just, like, all of these elements just kind of like with, especially like with Goomba King and the Star Spirits, those are like the main two kind of pointing at this, like, and I feel like that kind of brings us into like the next topic here with like the connected continuity, like with these, since Paper Mario 64, like, with the Star Spirits and everything, and then with the fact that they are connected in other games as well, I feel like that definitely kind of implies that that game is, like, completely canon and, like, kind of, like, very connected to the rest of the Mario franchise and everything, as it, like, directly builds off of the lore from Super Mario RPG, since the Star Spirits are basically implied to be Gino's higher authority.
Yeah, and also the shamans originated in Mario RPG. And it's interesting about the shamans though, because it makes me wonder, like, why didn't Square really care? Because those designs of Merlin and Co. were clearly inspired by the shamans in Mario RPG. So I'm wondering if they changed it just enough that Square wasn't gonna throw a fit about it.
Yeah. And I feel like there are, like, all of these little details and things, like, even with some of, like, the designs, like, with the lava bubble and different things like that that were carried over from Super Mario RPG into Paper Mario 64. There's definitely a lot of those elements that were kind of brought over and everything. And, yeah, and, like, another thing, like, with the continuity is that, like, the block from Paper Mario in Superstar Saga is kind of included with, like, other blocks from, like, other past Mario games from, like, the perspective of Superstar Saga, and it's implied to be one of Mario's past adventures. So...
yeah, and that's the only one there that isn't from a mainline.
Yeah. So, like, I feel like, why would they include that in Superstar Saga if Paper Mario wasn't canon or was a separate universe? Like, it just makes so much sense.
And speaking of Superstar Saga, they have Beanish characters in Thousand Year Door also.
Yeah, that's true.
So, like, and also Chocola Cola.
Yeah.
Although that was added in localization, but I honestly think that the localization made a good call there, because in the Japanese version it was just wine, which, yeah, cool alcohol reference in Mario, but, like, connecting it to Superstar Saga, it makes it so much more interesting.
Yeah, and then, like, another thing is the fact that, like, a lot of the time, like, especially in Paper Mario 64, and then even, like, future games kind of did this, but one specific thing that Paper Mario 64 did, in Luigi's Diary, it referenced things like Mario Kart, Mario Sports, and Mario Party. Like, it just kind of seems like that game was intended to be kind of, solidly a part of the Mario universe.
Yeah, and it also foreshadows Luigi's Mansion by talking about how Luigi's fear of ghosts and stuff.
Yeah, it definitely, like, connects it a lot with that. And then another thing, we were like, a lot of the things that we've been mentioning are from Paper Mario 64, and a lot of the time I see people kind of bring up the argument that, oh, only Paper Mario 64 is canon, or, like, they're only referencing things from Paper Mario 64 because all the other games are its own thing. But just because most of these references are from Paper Mario 64 doesn't mean that the other games aren't canon. Thousand Year Door and Super Paper Mario are also canon due to the fact that they're heavily connected with 64 and the continuity. Like, you have the photos in the Mario Bros. House in Super Paper Mario, as well as the Thousand Year Door remake now. And then you have all of those character cameos, like Boo and Thousand Year Door, and then also like the reference to Junior Troopa as well, and like a ton of other things.
I think that the fact that they went out of their way to put that in the house in the Thousand Year Door remake just reinforces how connected they are, because it wasn't there in the original. It was clearly an idea they came up with in Super Paper Mario to have that there. But the fact that they, when they were remaking Thousand Year Door, actively chose to go back and add that photo of its 64 partners suggests to me that it is very deliberately, these are very deliberately connected to each other, take place in the same continuity. There's really no way to say otherwise.
Yeah, like, they're just, like, heavily connected, like, with, like, just between the references, and then also, like, a lot of the characters and enemies and different things like that. The fact that they have similar art styles, similar designs, similar, like, gameplay elements between them even, it just seems like they're so heavily connected that it just seems like they're a part of the same continuity. Like, Thousand Year Door and Super Paper Mario are definitely direct sequels to Paper Mario 64. So, yeah. And then, also, another thing I think is worth bringing up is the modern games. I feel like the modern games are kind of weird. I mean, they do have, like, some very small elements and references connecting them to the older games, but they're not really connections. They're really just, like, Goombella and Parakarry just seems like just a small reference that could have been thrown in. It's nothing like the connections in the older Paper Mario games.
Yeah, like, I feel like the Goombella and Parakarry references, while at the time, I thought, oh, okay, so they do still remember the old games, but I distinctly remember an interview being said where they were talking about how they weren't allowed to use characters from the old games, but you will find, but in a certain level, you will find a note from a character from an old game. Look forward to that. And I think it was from like someone in the localization. I don't remember exactly, but the fact that those two are there, nothing else in the entire game. Like the game does reference a lot of things, but it's all centered just within the main series Mario. Like there's a lot of like mainline Mario throwbacks that you wouldn't really see as often in the older Paper Mario games, because the older Paper Mario games were focused on referencing each other and building up a continuity with each other, whereas they weren't allowed to do that in Sticker Star. And so I feel like those two references there are the exception, not the rule.
Yeah. And then there's also the Peach photos in Origami King, which I think, like, with that, I feel like the thing is, it's not really, like, it's really just seems like a small reference or a cameo there, kind of like...
I feel like that's even less of a connection, because Peach is a character that exists in all the games anyway.
Yeah.
So, I feel like it's made to mean something to the player, but I don't believe in universe that's anything other than a few photos, just standard. Like I don't think, because why would in universe, if it's all one continuity, the characters wouldn't have changed art styles that drastically. Like Paper Mario 64 had the pixelated look, but a photo from it in universe, Peach would not look different between that and Thousand Year Door.
Yeah.
I feel like they decided to reuse the old sprites just for something cute for the player, but not. It wasn't meant to make any statement in universe. And there's also the fact that there was kind of an attempt to reference Bobbery, where I think Bobby says he wishes he could be an admiral, but I don't know. I feel like that's a stretch.
Yeah. At this point, I feel like the only way they could make the modern games connected to the classic games at all is by doing anything in the Thousand Year Door remake, like just having like something like, but I don't really think there is much to reference anyway, because most of the things that would be in most of the things that are in the modern games would be like kind of have their own counterpart in the classic games and everything.
Really, the only thing I could picture them adding would be the sombrero guys.
Yeah. But, with, like, the fact that they're canon or not, I think that's more up to debate. I'm not gonna say that they are or are not canon, but I think that's more, I feel like that's more up to interpretation than the classic games. The classic games, like, and especially the points that we'll get into in a little bit, I feel like that kind of more, solidifies them as being, like, core canon Mario adventures. But with the modern games, I feel like there's definitely arguments that you can make for or against them being canon with, like, less evidence to back it up.
I think the modern Paper Mario games are more likely to be canon to the Paper universe in Mario Luigi Paper Jam, because like the world is very consciously made of paper, and it knows that it's made of paper, and all the characters just have abilities come to them naturally because they're flat, whereas in the older games, magic had to be involved.
Yeah. I think for the modern games, it's more of like certain elements from them could be canon or not. Like, there's a possibility, like, what if like the ancient Toad civilization in Origami King is
that definitely could. That definitely could be. Although, yeah, that was one of the things I did kind of appreciate about Origami King, because that didn't really shove paper in anywhere. It was just kind of organic. It was just a shame that, you know, the Toads were mostly very restricted in their design.
Yeah.
And if we could get a game that had TTYD's character design and expanded on that kind of lore, showing like the ancient history of the Mushroom Kingdom, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I definitely would like to see that. But yeah, moving on to kind of like another thing, kind of like connected to our topic that we were talking about, like regarding like papery elements, because Thousand Year Door does have some things that people like to bring up when arguing like whether or not the Paper Mario series is canon, and one of those is curses in the game. Well, that's really the main thing that people bring up. So with the curses, while Mario kind of turns into like a papery form, they're really more like transformations, like any other Mario power-up or form that Mario can take on. And Mario has actually done weirder things in other games, like in Mario Wonder, like he could stretch his body in like the Wonder forms, or like turn into different enemies, or like just weird things can happen. They're like honestly even weirder than like regular Mario kind of turning into a sheet of paper and becoming a paper airplane. Like visually in Thousand Year Door, you see Mario turning into a literal sheet of paper in the game, kind of implying that if this looked like a 3D Mario game, or if this used like the 3D models, of the regular Mario characters and everything, they would just turn into a flat sheet of paper and then fold with these curses.
Yeah, I feel like it would probably look kind of like this. Mario jumps up in his 3D form, he turns into a PNG of himself with a white background, and he folds. I feel like that's basically how it would look, and it would be the same thing.
Yeah, it's clearly like how they show it. It's kind of like they kind of clearly show that there, and I feel like it just feels like one of Mario's transformations. Like Mario is not like it's definitely like Mario's definitely very like kind of like familiar with all these transformations and things. So I don't really think that's an argument against Paper Mario being canon and everything, because that's really kind of...
Another thing that I'd like to bring up is people often, not as often as for the Thousand Year Door curses, but some people also bring up the flip ability from Super Paper Mario and how all the other characters appear flat and they can't see you when you're using it. But my interpretation of that is that Super Paper Mario's world in universe is not 2D. Like they call it 2D because that's what would make sense to the player, but it opens up on Mario's house, the same one from Thousand Year Door. 2D perspective instead of 3D. Is that a different location? No. So it's the same. It would be like saying 2D Mario games and 3D Mario games have to be in different universes because the camera angle is different. So the base dimension that Mario's in Super Paper Mario is still the same one from Thousand Year Door. He's transcending to a higher plane of existence when he flips to 3D. That's why the other characters can't see him. Only difference is he's actually transcending into a dimension that would be unrepresentable for human eyes, for 4D.
Yeah, like that's really how I always thought about it. It's like 3D to 4D. That just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and people, and a lot of people have dismissed this when I brought it up because they basically just go, but the dialogue calls it 2D. And I'm like, so the player can understand.
Yeah, like, because they wouldn't say things like 3D and 4D because the player would be like, why are they saying 3D when everything is just on a flat plane? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But in universe, it makes much more sense. So they really would have to say 2D and 3D, like when talking to the player and everything, because that's basically the mechanic of the game. So, yeah. But let's address the elephant in the room here. Mario & Luigi Paper Jam. This is the game that changed everything about how Paper Mario is discussed, like, canonically and everything. Because a lot of people use Paper Jam as a way to argue that Paper Mario takes place in a pocket dimension, like in a book, and just only exists there, but not in the actual Mario universe. But I feel like with Paper Jam, despite a few throwaway lines, every paper character has a real counterpart, implying that the events of the real world are exactly the same as the paper world. But the thing is, the paper world in Paper Jam may not be the same as, like, the world in, like, Thousand Year Door, 64, Super Paper Mario, because there's, like, no references to those games in Paper Jam. They really only reference Sticker Star, because that's really the only game that has, like, different characters and things in Paper Jam.
Yeah, like, it's so derivative of Sticker Star, down to the fact that Paper Luigi is just a cameo. And fun fact, his sprite sheet is literally the Sticker Star one. Exactly. It only has, like, that one pose. So, like, everything, that might be part of why they reuse things from Sticker Star. They didn't want to reuse things from the older games because they would have to downscale it. I don't know. But regardless, it doesn't do anything to suggest that this papery, very aware of itself group of characters is the same ones from the older Paper Mario games, because, like, it really, all it's portrayed as, oh, this is another Mario, this is another Peach, this is another Bowser. That's all they do with it. They don't draw any Paper Mario connections. The bosses are just random mainline Mario bosses that literally have no prior history in either series, or maybe in some cases, like Petey Piranha was in Partners in Time, but, like, there was no prior relevance for King Boo or King Bob-omb to be in a Mario & Luigi or Paper Mario game, and yet those are the bosses they chose for the game that was a crossover. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It feels like they were treating the Paper universe more as just a copy of the vanilla Mario universe. That's
yeah. And I feel like the fact that they only use Sticker Star actually kind of makes the fact that the first 3 Paper Mario games are canon, like, even more, like, relevant, and it makes even more sense. Because, like, like, I feel like, I mean, that might have been, I know, like, I feel like the fact that, like, it's just, like, they didn't have any ideas just seems like an excuse for why they didn't bring, like, older characters in. But I'm wondering if, like, that idea actually had any, like, validity to it, like, with the fact that they didn't have ideas. Because maybe they, like, they kind of knew that, like, those older Paper Mario games were, like, real Mario adventures and everything, but they couldn't really find a way to, like, kind of capture that, like, capture the fact that they are, like, Mario adventures kind of represented in a book, because they'd have to make, like, real, quote-unquote, real versions of those characters in the Mario and Luigi style. So I'm thinking, like, they just chose Sticker Star, because what if Sticker Star, that kind of, that reboot, refresh of the series, was kind of like...
To be fair, though, like, if they weren't going into it from the perspective of, what if X character meets their counterpart as being the main focus, what if they more went into it from the perspective of, like, what if... Because Alpha Dream would know that they've designed a lot of unique characters for the Mario universe, and Intelligent System also had. What they should have done with it was just, what if their contributions and Intelligent System's contributions met, and how would they interact? That should have been the way they went about it, rather than just, what if each character met themselves? Then they wouldn't have really needed to create Mario and Luigi versions of Paper Mario characters, like sprites.
Yeah.
And they could still, and then they could still justify it by saying, oh, this universe has all the same characters, we just see certain ones, and that's, you know, how they do it. But it was 2015. It was the 2010s. I don't think we were gonna get anything more than a standardized version of Mario and Luigi combined with Sticker Star.
Yeah. And I feel like it just Paper Jam, like, what I was mentioning with kind of like how really Sticker Star is the only one represented, it kind of makes me feel like Sticker Star, well, between Sticker Star and Origami King, that kind of feels like it's like that would be the contained paper world, not necessarily connected to the older Paper Mario games. That would be like maybe the one represented in Paper Jam, kind of like how you were mentioning. That just really seems more likely to me, like rather than like that, rather than.
I just came up with the most amazing headcanon as to why the references to Goombella and Parakeet stickers. Somebody took that book and vandalized, inserted those characters because they were salty that they weren't in there.
Yeah.
Like,
it was Herringway. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of Herringway, we'll get into the next topic now. So the final argument I kind of see people bring up when they talk about Paper Mario not being canon is Thousand Year Door starts with a book. So all of the Paper Mario games take place within books. So with that argument, 64,000 Year Door and Super Paper Mario, I feel like they're all real Mario adventures that happen to exist within a book. And basically, at the end of Paper Mario 64, the character Herringway wrote a book about Mario's adventures called Paper Mario, kind of implying that the events of the book, or the events of the story and everything, were kind of written in a book. And then that would possibly mean that Thousand Year Door and Super Paper Mario would also have books about their adventures too. So it just kind of makes a lot of sense that, like, they are Mario, like, real Mario adventures, but they also have, like, a written book variant of them. Like, not a separate universe, but, like, just a book with the stories written in them, which is possibly why Thousand Year Door starts with a book opening.
Yeah, and also just a book opening. I agree that basically that book, it was probably one of Herringway's books that he wrote about Mario's adventures. He probably kept following along and getting updated on what latest adventure Mario had gone on so that he could write them into books. Maybe even off screen, Mario actually goes back there and talks to the penguins in Shiver City, and maybe that's how he finds out about each of these adventures that Mario goes on.
Yeah.
And so like that, but at the same time, a book opening is just very aesthetic, especially for us for a book that a story like Thousand Year Door, where it starts with this ancient legend of a ancient civilization. And honestly, it's a little confusing to me because the book presents itself like an old record of that civilization that was written before the events of Thousand Year Door happened. But then we can clearly see Peach in one of the pictures, so that kind of I don't know.
Yeah, it's just like there's a lot of like things, like even like movies and things you could see start with books and things. It just like I feel like that's kind of like it kind of symbolizes that it's like a more story-based Mario adventure and everything. And the fact that like all this book theming is kind of like tied with the older Paper Mario games, I feel like the reason for that is because they're like more story based and everything. They kind of have that branding, like that book kind of style, that storybook style, because it's like because they kind of have a more heavy focus on the story and everything, not because it's a separate universe contained within a book. Like it just the whole intention of the creation of the Paper Mario series is to basically expand upon the story that was originally told in Super Mario RPG and kind of have like a Mario game that focuses more on the story, not the write a story that takes place in a different universe. I don't think that was ever the intention when they were creating the original Paper Mario, or even Thousand Year Door and Super Paper Mario. I don't think they really had that in mind until like
Yeah.
the 2010s.
Yeah, and I think I can pinpoint the exact point in time when they shifted that priority. In the interviews about Sticker Star, they mentioned how there were requests from Miyamoto about it's fine without a story, and as much as possible complete it with only vanilla Mario characters. That was all paraphrased, of course, but they then said, well, since we couldn't focus on the story and characters, we decided to focus on paper. That they basically said that.
The paper elements really kind of felt like an excuse or kind of something to cover up the fact that they weren't able to use a lot of like original characters and things. That really seems very apparent. Like especially around the time they started kind of using it more, it kind of feels like something they would kind of put like it kind of feels like something to artificially make the game like seem better. Like it just like, oh, this game has a great art style. It looks great. That would be on the surface.
Yeah, like that actually did work for me at first. Like before the game came out, I was just completely oblivious to how little was actually being shown because I don't know. I just it was going to be the first handheld Paper Mario game. I liked the animations like at the time, at the time. Now I actually still vastly prefer the smooth animations of Thousand Year Door, but at the time I was like, oh, that's actually a cute approach for a game that's on a handheld system. I thought maybe the characters were pre-rendered and lower resolution, to save space for the 3DS. I thought, oh, maybe it's a hardware reason it looks like that, and that's a cute way of handling it. And I was like, I was looking at it, and I was like, I watched Mario go into the shop and the cute animation of the shop opening up, and I'm like, I like this. And then I didn't even notice that the enemies had been redesigned at the time. It's amazing because I would watch that trailer, the E3 2011 trailer. I would watch that over and over as a kid, well, as a teenager, and I never saw the red flags. I never saw the like I would just watch it and I would be like, I wonder who the secret main villain is. I wonder what the story of this game is going to be.
And then it just didn't happen.
Yeah. But I think they really went a lot harder with like the papery animations and stuff to try to distract from what they weren't allowed to have there anymore.
Yeah, and I also noticed another interesting thing, about like kind of connected to how like Nintendo was portraying Paper Mario and everything. Because if you look at the back of the box of both Thousand Year Door and Origami King, in Thousand Year Door it describes it as Mario returns the paper form. And then when you look at Origami King, it says, will King Ollie bend the world to his origami whims? Not if Paper Mario can stop him. They don't call him Mario on the back of the box. They call him Paper Mario. When Thousand Year Door just says Mario in paper form. So it kind of seems like there's clearly a difference between the two.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Like the shift in the way the world is really portrayed is really the biggest thing for me. It's easy to want to just dismiss the modern Paper Mario games just because they use nothing from the classic Paper Mario games, but there's just also the fact that they, down to the very way the world is designed, like even there's even smaller things that aren't directly related to the paper stuff that just don't line up with the way it's portrayed in classic Paper Mario. And one of those things is Bobby and how he works, how his story works. He explodes, that's it, he's gone. Whereas in the older games, when a bomb explodes, he can respawn. Even the ones, even like the ones in the Glitz Pit, like they explode in battle and don't respawn in battle, but he's still in the locker room after that.
Yeah.
So, like,
yeah, the thing is with the Bob-ombs is pretty weird. I feel like that's kind of a discussion for its own, because it kind of... I think there's, like, a lot of arguments you could make, like, either way about the Bob-ombs, because, like, there's, like, I see people bring up, like, the manufactured versus organic Bob-ombs. I've seen that kind of brought up a lot, kind of like that one funny image about the thwomps. But that's even weirder of a discussion. But with Bob-ombs, I'm not sure if that would really be... I mean, yes, it's definitely connected about how they would be handling the Paper Mario series, but in terms of, like, continuity with the Mario franchise as a whole, I think that's kind of a different discussion at that point. Because, I mean, like, there are Bob-ombs in the mainline Mario games that die when they blow up. So, it's kind of...
There's also some, like, even in like mainline, where, like, for example, Mario 64, you pick up a bomb, you throw it, it explodes. It doesn't respawn on screen, but when you walk away and come back, he's back again. And I feel like most enemy deaths in mainline Mario games aren't meant to be like actual murder. Like, you're not murdering things, you're defeating them, and they're out of commission. Like, that would be pretty dark if Mario was actually killing every enemy he defeated.
Yeah, I think Miyamoto... someone in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Miyamoto brought up the fact that Mario doesn't kill any of his, like, enemies or opponents. Like, I think he said that before. So, like, basically any enemy that you're killing in Mario, you're not actually killing. They're just, like... I guess they're just kind of, like, mostly kind of weakened at that point, but... He
basically knocks them out and puts them out of commission. And that kind of, from a gameplay perspective, they need to be gone because you defeated them.
Yeah.
I think that's the only reason it looks like you're killing them. Gameplay defeat something, it needs to be out of your way.
Yeah, the only thing with Bobby that I'd say, like, might be, like, like not really connect to this as much, is the fact that I feel like that could kind of like the fact that I feel like this would be a different discussion is because Bobby basically he sacrifices himself, and Mario doesn't necessarily like interact with that. So I don't know, like maybe bombs are capable
Yeah.
of like
And
using.
maybe the fact that he was using a different Bomb's fuse played a role in why it was permanent.
Yeah, but yeah, I just like even without that scenario, I feel like there are just a lot of things like disconnecting like the classic and modern Paper Mario games, which is why I think they're like just kind of separate continuities and why it's much more likely that the modern Paper Mario games would be in like a similar continuity as the Paper World from Paper Jam. But yeah, I just think like Paper Mario with the first three games, it just makes much more sense to think of them as canon Mario adventures, kind of represented in a different art style. Like Yoshi's Island kind of has a very stylized art style like that, and that's still obviously considered very canon. And even the modern Yoshi games, like Woolly World and Crafted World, I think unless there was like any interviews saying that those were separate, I think they are implied to be canon, but are just like represented in a different art style. I think it might be a similar kind of scenario as the older Paper Mario games. But yeah, it would just make much more sense to kind of consider the first three games to be canon, while kind of leaving the modern three games up for interpretation, like we've kind of been mentioning here.
Yeah, there's certain elements of them that I could see being canon, like ancient Toad history in Origami King. But most of it just feels kind of like a separate continuity.
So yeah, but anyways, I just think it's safe to say that the classic games are canon and everything. But yeah. So anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to subscribe to Fawful the Great as well. But anyways, thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.
Bye bye.